I'm the author of www.getyourchildintogat.com. Welcome to Test Prep 201, Figure Matrices. I'm starting with figure matrices because what I'm about to describe applies to most test question types on most cognitive skills tests. Although when we get into the details, you'll find that there are some intricacies on each question type. I get a lot of questions about the verbal sections, and next week I'm going to cover those. I consider this a good starting point to launch verbal as well. Let's start with the course outline. We're going to do an overview of the test so you understand what it is. That's going to determine your behavior in coaching the test. I'm going to describe how to coach. A lot of that's review. And then we're going to go into figure matrices and apply the principles from the test, at least at a high level, to figure matrices. Let's start with the test. If you do test prep properly, targeting the skills of the test is equivalent to targeting the skills needed to excel in a GAP program. In fact, spending a few months on cognitive skills work is a great way to increase academic skills. They are, after all, almost one and the same. So the primary purpose of the test is surprise and confusion. They want to present the child with a novel problem that is slightly complicated, requires some analysis and some patience. Keep in mind, you will not be there to help, so conduct your test prep sessions accordingly, and I'll get into that. The test builds in little frustrations and setbacks, which is, a bundle of skills that are required for high academic performance. With older children, there's a lot going on with each question, so working memory is going to come into play. And your child's going to need to make some decisions, especially on test question types for older children. Checking and double checking is imperative for scores above 85% on any test. But surprise and confusion is probably the biggest thing to keep in mind. In Test Prep 101, I covered the big skills. This defines the learning environment at home, hopefully for everything, but certainly for test prep. It's okay to be baffled and confused. That's a good starting point. That's the new normal. Reading the question is more than just the matrix with the question mark. It includes the answer set as well. Ideally, reading the question is 90% of the work, and the answer is a derivative of that work. You want the child to check the answer. In fact, they're going to check the answer and see that they're wrong and have to go back and start over. That's why it's so important not to be flustered when you get a question wrong. So getting it wrong is okay. You can get it wrong as many times as you want. In fact, in the process of getting things wrong, before you get to the solution, a lot of learning is going to take place. So we know what the test is. We have this environment in mind. Let's talk about coaching skills. The number one skill of a parent is not to help. What are you trying to teach your child? You're trying to teach them how to think and how to develop learning skills on their own, helping short circuits that process. So you're going to answer questions with one or more questions. Don't explain. When the child says, I don't understand this, can you explain it to me? The answer should be read it again. The answer after that, maybe after 2 or 3 times, is, okay, you explain it to me. We'll go one word at a time, one phrase at a time, if that's what it takes. And in my experience, that's normally where we're starting with most kids. And there's no time limit. Take as long as you take. A lot of thinking and growth is going to occur if you spend 25 minutes on a single problem. If your child spends 10 or 15 minutes doing 10 or 15 problems, I wouldn't have high expectations that they increase their cognitive skill level. That said, let's launch into figure matrices. The number one approach for figure matrices is to get the story right. For the younger children, this is most of the battle. For older children, when there's a lot more going on, you'll see that telling the story is still preeminent. As the kids get older, the story has some twists and turns in it that can't be resolved without looking at the answer set. And you need to look at the answer and explain these as well before you're prepared to pick one. Generally speaking, when we do test prep, we don't look at the solutions. As soon as you say the answer is B, regardless of what the child has picked, learning stops. So In some cases, we go through 20-25 minutes looking at a couple of problems without even bothering to check the solutions. So let's do some examples here. This first simple example is from the Sartell, Minnesota School District. This school district published a document showing the different types of test questions and introducing the parents and their children in the hopes that everybody would be on the same level playing field and get those 4 points. So let's see if we can figure out the story. We've got an arrow and it flips, right? So if you're just going to hurry on to answer this question, here's an arrow, it flips, that's the middle one, but that doesn't do it justice. We have an arrow that could turn 180 degrees or it could flip vertically. So let's look at the answer set. So in the first case, this arrow could flip vertically, and there's a symmetry there, so it's going to come out exactly as it started, and therefore this is the answer. That would be my preference. But look at the case where the arrow turns 180 degrees. Here we have an arrow pointed left, it turns 180 degrees, it points right. So it looks like the middle one's the answer. Or there's the trivial case or the corner solution where you have an arrow and it ends up pointing down. We have an arrow down here, it ends up pointing down, so it's the last answer. This is in fact a ridiculously sloppy question. I don't know why the Sartell, Minnesota School District published it. It looks like it's a test question or a question out of a book that didn't make the cut for those reasons. So let's move on. With 4-year-olds, okay, I like this question because there's a lot happening here, although I took this out of the quantitative section of shape, size, color, count. Here we have 8 triangles. Let's tell the story. We end up with 4 triangles, and by the way, they're pointing down. So we lost half of our triangles. Okay, that's one answer. We had 8, now we have 4, it's -4, which sounds kind of odd to be presenting to 4-year-olds, but we're on question 56 and it just works. What else could be happening with this if this were a figure matrix question? Well, we've got lightly shaded and darkly shaded triangles up on the first row, and we lose the dark ones, and then on the second row we lose the light ones. And then you can go on and just let the child learn how to see, learn how to pick things apart, look at it from different perspectives. And it's all, you'll notice this figure matrix only has the top row. I did this because with 4-year-olds I became so frustrated that they were getting nowhere with figure matrices, and practice books were out of the question. When we came away from this exercise, there was a cognitive skills explosion. Let's move to an older age group for a second. I found this question on www.testpreponline.com, and I'm very intrigued with this website. They'll give you 2 practice tests for a very expensive price, but I get so many questions from parents who just found out about cognitive skills test the school's going to give in 2 days, and they don't really have any other options. But I'm also intrigued that this site purports to present essentially practice tests and try to build cognitive skills at the same time. So look for a review later. Let's take a look at this. When I first looked at this top row, and I'm looking top row, okay, the first 3 boxes here don't change, and then something's happening with the next 2 rows, and I spent 10 minutes on it and came away thinking, I have no idea what's going on. If we look at the answer choices, which is of course part of reading the question, it's obvious from the first one that the story here is each box switches color, right? And if we look back up here, you can see that, but something else is happening. In fact, it's switching color and it's turning 1/4 turn clockwise. So we go through the answer choices. D was my first idea because some random things happening. That's not very promising. But if we take this one, which is simply changing color, and we flip it 1/4 turn clockwise, we end up with B. And without looking at the solutions, that's probably the answer. So we tell the story. We're looking for something else that could be happening. In this case, that's not exactly clear. We look at the answer. That's actually pointing the direction to solving the puzzle. And of course, I'm telling you, don't look at the answers until you have to, because once you do, that question's done. Okay, this question here is from a practice test by Mercer, which is one of the ones I've always recommended on my blog because I think it's true to the cognitive or the COGAT format. Let's see if we can tell the story here. We've got a circle and we end up with a line through the circle. Okay, that's possible. And of course, we've got a dark square that we're going to want to transform. And let's look at these options one by one. Here's the dark square with the line through it. That pretty much follows our story. Here's a square with that's changed colors and it has a line through it as well. So now the question is, did this white circle become white, right? Which means we've got a dark square and possibly that became white as well. Then we've got some corner solutions where somehow this circle turned into a circle, but when you see the answer, it'll help guide you on the rules of the COGAT. Okay, so tell the story. What else could be happening is something to look at, and it doesn't look like that's part of this question either. Let's move on. 8 and 9. Now I'm talking about cognitive skills training. So what I did is I took the figure matrix and I removed the matrix. And in addition to that, I doubled the number of shapes for level 2, and you'll see in a second I tripled the number of shapes for level 3. We're trying to build working memory, which on its own works magic on the tests. So let's go into our story mode. We've got a pie shape that doubles in width and height. So at this age, I expect a very detailed story. This doesn't just get bigger. That's not going to help us. We've got a triangle that turns a quarter turn counterclockwise. We've got a circle. Now, if this is question 7. By this time, the children are looking for 2 shapes to transform, and then you're going to apply the transform to the 3rd shape. And all of a sudden, we've got a circle in here that I don't know what happened to it. Is it covered up? Did it end up in the group that needs to be transformed? So we're going to move on. We're going to look at the answers, okay, because that's part of our work before we're ready to solve this. And it looks pretty obvious that we've got our pentagon from the target set to be transformed, and there's a circle. In fact, for lack of time here, here's a circle that increases in width and height, and my pentagon would then take on the other transformation, which is the counterclockwise quarter turn, and this is our answer. We could go into detail, and I usually do when I'm talking to kids. Why is this one wrong? How could this possibly be right? And the answer is no. And then, of course, this is not a quarter turn, so that's out. Okay, and then finally, let's look at the story and some of the ambiguity in a level 3 problem, which I'm warning you now is question 52, so the kids have had more than enough time to pick up the cognitive skills they need to tackle a question like this. So we've got a hexagon, and inside it is a rectangle, and both of those either turn dark regardless of the initial color, or they take on the opposite color. And the rectangle has been cut in half vertically and is now a square. And our other shape that takes on the opposite color as well is this circle missing a quarter, and it either flips horizontally or it has a 1/4 counterclockwise turn. And all of that is going to take time to suss out. So now we've got our target shapes, and I can't even tell what that dark shape is. So at this point, we're reviewing the answer set where you can see clearly that that's an hourglass. And then we've got this other shape here. Now, in the case where we're going to lose one or more sides, we're probably going to have to count them. So I got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's a big number. We'll just call it a fork shape. So I need to see a shape that decreases in height. I've got this here. It also looks like I've got it there. And again, we're trying to get the child to spend time thinking and spend time looking. And then the hexagon shape, okay, so this is upside down. Is that good or is that bad? Well, the hexagon shape becomes dark right? In fact, these two become dark, and then the star and the fork shape become dark. Now, did the hexagon flip or turn? And the answer is yes, it could have. And we don't know that up here, so we've got some ambiguity in our story that needs to be resolved. Finally, can I find a quarter turn counterclockwise with a shape that flips colors or becomes white? And the answer is yes, I can. It's this hourglass shape, and doing a quarter turn in an hourglass shape that's at a 45-degree angle is another challenge. One thing I want to point out is this is not just 3 problems in one. Having to figure out what that shape is like 3.5 problems in one. And this is question 52. So you can imagine in the 102 questions in section 3 of Test Prep Math Level 3, we've probably got somewhere around 400 questions. And I did this section because I'm not taking any chances on GAD entry. I want a kid that can turn and manipulate shapes in their sleep. Anyway, to review for figure matrices, all the way down to I should say up to the older ages, having a good story that includes the ambiguities and the options is a big part of the battle. Looking at the answers and taking the time during test prep practice to come up with how well this story does or what the story could be for each answer is wonderful practice. We're not in any hurry to get to the answer and stop learning. We want that learning to go on as long as possible. And that's why be reluctant to look at the answers. So there you go. That is figure matrices. Feel free to ask questions. You can post comments to www.getyourchildintoGAT.com. I suggest you take a look at this video a couple of times. I'm going as fast as I can to get it all in a short period of time. So review it. And if you didn't see 101 and you're confused about being baffled and reading the question, for the coaching skills, if you're the type of person who likes to answer your child's questions, then I encourage you to also take a look at Test Prep 101. Thank you very much.